your mind truly free, or is it caged?
This is Do Your Part with Brian Gallo.
Welcome back, everybody, to Do Your Part. You know who I am, and you don't know who this guy is. We have another new, exciting guest with a very unique perspective. We get to talk to Dave Westphal today. He's a veteran. He's from the Midwest. I know a little bit about him. How you doing, buddy?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I'm glad you're here. I don't really know you, but I kind of know you. And in discussions we've had, I was like, you know what? My radar went up, and I said, I got to get you in here for this. So Thanks for being here.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Why did you decide to come? Just because I asked?
Yeah, pretty much. You asked. I thought maybe my story would be interesting for some people, and I do feel like maybe there's some things I'd like to say. So yeah. So
I like that.
Yeah.
So then let's jump right in. What is interesting about your story?
Tell
us about your story. Paint us a beautiful picture.
Yeah, I kind of went everywhere. So I started out in a small town, Midwest. I was born in Gary, Indiana.
You're the third guest out of like 10 from Gary, Indiana. Go ahead. And I won't ask you about the Jacksons. Go ahead.
Yeah, right. I was born in Gary, grew up in a small town, Lowell, Indiana. It's just south of Gary, like maybe 20 miles. And I really realized when I was in high school that I needed to get out of there. That it's sort of a dying community there, and dying might be a little bit of a strong word, but Lake County, Indiana, and that area was heavily into industry. It was the most industrialized county in the nation. Wow. And graduating high school in the late 80s, there's not a lot of jobs left there, and I was tossed around going right to college, and I ended up joining the military. So had never been to the ocean and joined the Navy.
So the ocean and traveling were the two things that called you to the Navy.
Yep. So I getting out of my little town. So I had realized I was gay, or was starting to realize that. Not quite. Like I grew up in or went to a Baptist school and Baptist high school, and it was very conservative.
But let me stop you there.
Yeah.
Because it seems like, given the era and the time, and given the school and setting you were in, the fact that you were able to come out at that age is...
I didn't come out yet, but I was starting to realize.
We were coming out to yourself.
Yeah.
When you look at stories of Mormons or some people that come out in their 50s and 60s because of their, the religious kind of influence. Yeah, this is interesting. Go on.
Yeah, I started to realize, and I think at that point when I enlisted when I was 17 and went right after my 18th birthday. It was more of a sense of, I need to find myself, and I'm not going to find it here.
Wow.
And that was kind of what drove me.
It was your eat, pray, love.
Right. And my parents strongly suggested that I go to a Christian college, and I knew I did not want to do that. Not that I have anything against Christian colleges, but I had already had, 6 years of Christian school, and I just felt, in my heart that was enough. And I wanted to have different perspectives.
When you're in these schools, are you learning more about the Bible? Or are you learning more about academics and the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s?
Right. It's academics. So it was a pretty good school. I graduated salutatorian. Woohoo. Wasn't really saying much. There was only 10 in our class.
You're still 1 out of 10.
Right. So the school was really a good school. I don't have anything really bad to say about it, except that it's extremely, conservative. It's really, we had to have short hair and couldn't wear jeans and tennis shoes, and girls had to wear dresses. And
was it diverse? Were there people of color in your school?
There were very little. It wasn't an exclusive school, or they didn't exclude anybody. But there were very little. The community itself was probably 95% white in Lowell. The county of Lake County is a very mixed county, but Lowell's on the southern end. It's more of a farming community. So it's very small. So at that time, now it's more mixed. Now it's more of a suburb of Chicago.
Gotcha.
At this point. So, but in the 80s, yeah, for sure was, mostly white. That's actually interesting, because when I got in the Navy, and instantly when you enter the military reflects society.
America.
America. Yeah. And so it was really interesting for me, because I was around people of all different backgrounds, racial backgrounds, whatever. I often tell people that formulated views for me that I carry on to this day, because I had a lot sort of intrinsic bias that, obviously everyone still carries it. But that time, being 18, just barely 18 years old, and, being surrounded by people from all over the nation and all different backgrounds, all different races, really began to formulate, my thinking going forward for the rest of my life.
I want to hover on something for a moment. And again, I'm not here to kind of hard press you, but I'm curious. Intrinsic bias. What was that? What were those?
Oh, so
if you're open to sharing.
Yeah. So I would say growing up in the Midwest, and this might not be everybody, but you form your opinions based on what your family might say, or what you might hear in church or school, or what you see on television. So, I was one of those people, and I think a lot of people in those small towns growing up, and maybe it's changed since the 80s. You have opinions of people of other racial backgrounds that quite frankly aren't true. They might be some sort of stereotype. You might think a certain group is lazy, or a certain group is really great at math, or another group might have some sort of weird religions or whatever, something like that. Like you really have, or you might think one group is smarter than the other group, and those really melted away for me when I got in the military.
Melted away.
Yeah.
So it wasn't even really work. It wasn't necessarily something that you had to map out and work on. It just melted away.
Yeah, it just melted
away. Just
away.
by your experience.
Yeah, because you had to rely on other people, and you had to be around other people. I would say that my family background is very not racist, and not not. They're not actively racist.
Were you different from those around you? You guys were kind of different?
A little bit. So my stepdad, his mother was from Mexico, so there's a Hispanic sort of influence in that side. My stepdad raised me from the time I was 6.
Ah, okay.
So I never really met.
What's his last name?
Westphal.
Oh, gotcha. Okay,
yeah,
go ahead.
that's how we ended up with Westphal.
Gotcha.
Yep. And and so there was a little bit less of the
hardcore
sort of
prejudice influence.
Yeah, that you might see in some parts of the Midwest and small towns in
on
general.
all different levels.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and so it was very that was actually good for me, that I didn't have all of that baggage to sort of lose when I entered the military, and for sure some do. Some come from small towns, and they have opinions that come from their parents or from others that they're around, and they either lose it or they struggle in the military. I would say, like, the idea that the military has a white supremacy problem, I think, is not true. At least it wasn't in my experience.
I've never heard that.
Yeah,
I've heard of racism in the military,
Yeah.
but I've never heard of whites. That would sound tough. It almost sounds like a prison mentality.
Right, exactly. And I don't think that I saw it. Or at least I never did. I never even saw a Confederate flag or any of that stuff when I was in the military.
I don't know how you could conduct something like that in such a diverse. Again, it sounds like prison to me.
Right.
So I like this because I think that when people wrap their head around military or military experience, it tends to be daunting and scary and bloody and intimidating and lonely. But it sounds like a lot of this for you was just A, shaped who you are, and B, was incredibly positive.
Oh, yeah. I tell people that I got out of the military what I wanted to get when I went in. And that's one of the best things you could say possibly about anything, any job, any experience that you have. Like, it's a tough life. And I knew it wasn't, I pretty early on knew it wasn't going to be a 20 or 30 year experience for me, but I definitely got out of it what I wanted. I wanted to get out of my small town. I wanted a bit of an education. I went through the Navy's nuclear power program.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know. Anybody who knows anything about that,
You just said nuclear power. That's beyond me and probably a lot of our listeners. Sorry, guys. Love you.
It's
Go on.
super intense. Yep. And with
Wow.
a 50% attrition rate for, just people who don't make it. So, or at least at that time, it had a 50% attrition rate. And so I got some education out of it. I got to see a lot of the world. I was on a fast attack submarine, the USS Alexandria, which I'm going to see some of those people this week.
Okay, and so Talk about that.
Yeah.
This is a submarine?
Yeah, it's a submarine. So fast tech submarine.
Hold on real quick.
Yeah.
So you've spent time inside of a submarine down under thousands of feet or hundreds of feet
Yep,
underwater.
yep. Locked in the engine room.
Did your ears pop several times?
Oh yeah, yeah. So
That's a corny question.
Yeah.
Don't let me interrupt you for that. So
yeah,
what's happening with this USS Alexandria?
So currently they're deployed, and they, it's COVID-19 time, coronavirus, and so they've been basically sequestered on the boat. I don't have all the details, as one Secretary of Defense famously said at the beginning of the Trump administration, "We don't talk about submarines." So yeah,
Why?
Because they have to stay hidden. And
Oh,
so,
gotcha.
So they don't really talk about where they're at. So I don't know where they're at or where they've been or what they've done. All I know is that they've not been able to leave the boat since the whole thing started. So imagine. I mean, I'm sure that they've pulled in the port and they've had like you could go topside kind of thing because they've had to probably reload stores or things.
What
like
is
that.
topside where you just pull up the top?
Oh, where you pull in and then you can go like to the
Get some
pier,
fresh air.
go to the pier and hang out. Yeah, maybe they even brought in stuff.
But it's like they're on the moon.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. Yeah, submarine is the closest you can come on Earth to being on a spaceship.
Right. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, you produce your own air, you produce your own water.
You're nuts.
Yeah, you don't see you don't see the sun, you
Yeah.
don't get communications.
Right.
Yeah. Once when I was there, they had NLCS, ALCS baseball going on. So there were 4 teams, and by the time we pulled back in, the World Series was over. We didn't even know who was in it.
Wow. That's how long you were gone.
Yeah. And so-
Jeez.
yeah. So we pulled back in, and then they're like, "Hey, so and so won the world." I can't remember who it was. Won the World Series, and
Well, you don't remember because you weren't able to
Yeah,
experience
yeah.
it. All right. So tell me more about what's happening with this beautiful boat.
Yeah, so
Or
now
submarine.
they're pulling in, and so on Facebook, the booster club, the rec committee for the submarine, which is mostly like spouses of those serving on the submarine, they reached out on Facebook and said, "Hey, we're pulling in. We want to provide something specifically for the single sailors who are on the submarine, because they've been locked on that thing since March." And so what I did was I said, "Oh, that's great. A lot of people were donating money and whatever." But I was like, "Hey, I manage a Starbucks. Maybe I can get together with a few of my friends." Turns out to be 11 stores.
It's a lot of friends you got there.
Yeah. And we gathered some stuff. So tomorrow we're going to package it all up. I'm going to drive down to San Diego where the boat will be pulling in sometime. I don't know when. Nope, they never tell you exactly when. And I'm going to hand it off to the booster club, and they're going to make sure that everybody gets a little care package. And they are really small. So having been on a submarine, I know.
It's a gesture, though.
Yeah, I know that you can't do big things.
Right.
Don't buy everybody
A life-size teddy bear.
yeah, they're not gonna. That's gonna be worthless. So you want to do something that's easy to store, easy to use. So we did little packets of instant coffee inside a little mug because it is important to have your own mug on a submarine. Inside a little mug, and then inside a bag with some candy. That's it. And yeah, that's maybe with little messages written on it, that kind of thing. And
Nice.
yeah, something really simple that they can use. Trust me, everyone loves coffee on a submarine. So one thing you don't think about on a submarine is that if you're producing your own oxygen, you're below the ocean. Often the oxygen level isn't what it would be on the surface. So it's not 20.8% oxygen level. It might be much lower, significantly lower. So I was telling my husband the other day, I'm like, it's like spending a month at the top of Mount Everest.
Jeez.
Because the oxygen levels might be like
Hard pass.
really low, below 18%.
I'm getting lightheaded just hearing this.
Yeah.
All right, so
coffee's a necessity.
now, yeah, to say the least. Now, this is kind of a private event that you're doing, right? And I'm assuming one of many, because you and I have talked a bit about philanthropy and kind of things that you're going to get involved in. So, 11 stores, what a beautiful gesture for single sailors.
Yep.
Popping out of the USS Alexandria in
pretty
San Diego
specific.
this week.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we challenge you. Hopefully you'll be giving us several updates on more of these boats. What are they called? Top top shelving?
Top side.
Top siding.
Yeah.
And coming out and then, and also document this so we can share it with some of the viewers. So, all right. Talk more about philanthropy because I know that gay vets is important to you.
Yeah. So right now,
And I want you to talk about the plight, right? Because a lot of people don't know what's going on with vets and gay vets. So again, paint us kind of a picture.
Yeah. So I mean, if you go back in time a little bit, so when I entered the military, Ronald Reagan was president, and the official policy on homosexuals in the military service was no, you just simply couldn't serve, and you were asked, "Are you a homosexual?" Before you enlisted. I said no because I wasn't, small town, I didn't know, right? And so basically once I really came to terms with it, maybe 2 years after I was in for 6, I determined just to keep my mouth shut about it. I don't tell anybody, right?
Because you're kind of breaking a rule because you should have said yes in the beginning.
Absolutely. I was on the wrong side of the UCMJ, the Uniform Code of Military Justice. And I knew that. And so I just kept my mouth shut about it. So while I was in, Bill Clinton got elected, famously ran on a platform of releasing the ban on gays in the military. Ended up not doing that, compromised, and did the don't ask, don't tell policy, which took away the question. So they stopped asking the question, are you a homosexual? But they didn't stop prosecuting. So if you were caught doing something that was homosexual, you would be, prosecuted, kicked out. And typically, so you could get a dishonorable discharge if they did a full prosecution because it was against the UCMJ. Typically, though, they would either just do it as an honorable discharge and just let you out, maybe a medical discharge sometimes.
Geez, never just a warning? Like,
Right.
hey, clean it up?
Right? Oh, no. Yeah. Or they would do an other than honorable discharge.
Did you know anybody while you were serving that this happened to?
Yeah, so a couple. So there was a guy on the boat. I'm not going to mention his name, but he ended up spending several months in restricted barracks, which is
A nice jail?
nice jail, basically. He couldn't go anywhere, couldn't do anything. Had guards, and then finally his parents got a lawyer for him because they hadn't heard from him. And when he finally did make a phone call, he's like, hey, do something, right?
Oh, my goodness.
So they got a lawyer, and because the Navy didn't have any real proof, he was released. And he did go back and serve the rest of his term.
Wow.
Yeah.
And he wanted to go back after being treated that way.
And nobody wants to get other than honorable or dishonorable discharge. Everybody wants to finish it out.
It's like your resume.
Yeah. And that was my driving force. It really was. Like I wanted to get that DD 214 separation paper that said honorable discharge, and so I held on and did it. And there was another, some people who discover that they're gay do want out, and so another story, and this was a little bit of hearsay because I heard it through the grapevine kind of thing, was a guy who said, hey, I'm gay, I want out, and his command master chief said no. Like, we're not doing that, because it was right after Bill Clinton got elected. And he came in with pictures, threw it on the desk.
Damn, of him, like, having sex with dudes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And then
That did it.
And they're like, okay, you're free to go.
Wow, that worked.
Yeah, that
But
worked.
that would have been a dishonorable.
So he ended up probably with an other than honorable discharge, which you can then fight later after you're out to change to an honorable discharge. There are some things, some benefits or whatever, that if it was initially an other than honorable discharge, that I'm not 100% sure on this, but I think that there's some benefits you won't be able to get. That, if your DD 214 doesn't say honorable discharge.
So, all right, so talk more about the veteran experience, because I know that, this is heartbreaking, and you and I have talked a bit about this. So go on.
Yeah, so my personal experience is I got out and I wanted nothing to do with anything military after that. Like, it was really a difficult life, just sort of hiding who you are. And I'm like, I'm done. I got out. I ran as far away from the military as I could.
So this is the other side of the coin, because a lot of what we talked about was positive. This is the negative.
Yeah, this is the negative. And so I didn't want anything to do with it. So I, didn't take any advantage of any benefits.
Out of spite.
Yeah, out of just, well, and maybe a little bit of fear as well, because, you don't want you got out, you got that honorable discharge. That's what you wanted. But who's to say they can't go back on you and say, look, you knew that when you were in, right?
Yeah.
Here's
Paper
what
trail.
we're going to do now, right? And then along comes, and so I did that. And in talking to a lot of veterans, actually, gay veterans, they did the same thing. They got out, they did not look back. And some,
Out of fear.
some were combat veterans, not that I was shot at or anything on a submarine, but there were combat veterans who had maybe serious problems that just, hey,
Like
no,
PTSD, for
yeah,
example.
I'm not going to do anything about it.
Wow.
And so,
using the resources that were provided for
Right,
you, part
right.
of the deal that you made.
right. And so they often run away from it, and that's very common. And so, so I was, lumped right in there, and didn't really start to think about what benefits do I get from having served in the military, or what can they do? Like, I have medical condition, Crohn's disease, which was misdiagnosed in the military, and so hey, maybe they can help me with that, right?
Yeah.
I didn't really start to think about that until just a few years ago. So I just turned 50 yesterday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. And I was probably 45 when I started to think about, hey, whatever. Well, actually, no, I take that back. I did get a VA loan for my place 10 years ago, so I was 40.
Okay. But still incredibly late.
Yeah.
And just scratching the surface.
Just scratching the surface. And then I was at a bar, actually, and there a straight veteran, and he's like, wait, you have medical issues and you don't use the VA? And I'm like, no. And he's like, you need to call the VA. And so that was maybe 5 years ago. So I called the VA, and they're like, yeah.
We've been waiting for you.
So
Got your name right here.
So now I use the VA benefits that are there, and there's there's a ton of benefits. There's the state offers benefits. When I was in Illinois, I had a much reduced property tax on my house. California doesn't do that unless you're 100% disabled, but a lot of states do. Illinois is not alone on that. A lot of states reduce taxes. There's a lot of stuff out there for veterans and to help you if you have some medical related issue from your time of service, and or just mental health issues or crisis lines, all these things, right, that just are there, that I think I'm not alone in talking to a lot of gay vets who just don't use it. Like the medical benefits, I bet that if you polled gay vets, maybe a very small percentage, less than 10%, are probably using the medical benefits.
So when we've talked before, you talked a bit about the gay vet experience, and it's not comparable to other veterans. So is this a big portion, a big part as to why? Is because a lot of people aren't using the resources?
Yep.
And is there more to it? Is there more mental as far as the difference between a straight vet experience and a gay vet experience?
Yeah, because I'll tell you that I was really afraid the first time I had to go to a VA hospital. Here I am back in the military. I got to hide everything, right? And to be sure, there's some veterans out there who are very homophobic, for lack of a better word, right? And so maybe at a veterans inside the veterans community, you might run into that. My personal experience, especially with VA Health, has not been that
Good.
at all, and it's been very positive. And I've used it in 2 states, in Illinois and in California, and it's been very positive. And so every time I meet anybody who's a veteran and is gay, I'm like, hey, have you thought about the VA? I was talking.
So you're advocating for.
Oh, yeah.
Are there gay vet groups?
So there are most of them, though. So I've done a little bit of online research about what gay veterans groups I might want to join. I ended up actually just joining the American Legion and not a gay veterans group, because most of them are about advocating equality, which is great.
Yeah.
But it's kind of not what I'm about. I'm more, I'm more about, hey, just reach out and get your resources. Use those benefits that have been allotted to all of us for having served, that everybody else is using. We seem to be the group that's not, right? And so that's what I'm more about. And, there might be a gay group out there that's doing that. I haven't really run across it. But the good news is that the veterans organizations that do exist, the American Legion, VFW, and others, DAV, Disabled American Veterans, are learning to be more accepting and open, and are in some cases actively recruiting gay vets.
Wow.
And so that's a positive. They're not there yet. When you go to the American Legion, you're going to run into, some of the older guys who are like, whoa, that wasn't a thing back in my day.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it was a thing back in their day. They just didn't, see
Ignorance was bliss.
Yeah. And so it's coming around. I do think there is room, and maybe I'll be the one to start it someday, for a gay veterans group that is really just about the shared experience and not about the legal fight.
It's documented, everybody. He said he's going to start it on his own. We're going to hold you to that. How can people get involved? This isn't the tail end of our conversation. We've got much more. I want to talk to you a bit about race relations. I want to talk to you a bit about some of the stuff that's been going on currently. And you can save this answer for the end of the conversation. But I do want to know, for gay vets or gays out there or people, allies, how can they help this specific cause?
Yeah. So I don't have any information on specific groups, but there are groups out there that are fighting for equality for gays, and it is a good place to spend your money, because they're often tied to Lambda Legal and others. I don't want to name too many groups, but they're out there and they are fighting to help the gay veteran community or gays in the military, because it's still not an easy plight. We see what the current administration is doing to transgendered Americans in the military who want to fight, and it's a battle, and it's going to continue to be a battle as long as 40% of the country has a negative view. So
quit looking at my notes.
Oh, yeah.
What do you think about gun control? Because I know from your background, why do you make that face?
Because I feel like everybody always asks me about gun control.
Well, it's one of the first things, and I should have got to this at the beginning of the conversation. It's one of the things, knowing where you're from, knowing your military background, it almost seems like you would be thumbs up with guns.
And I'm not. Yeah.
Really? And you're not?
Well,
Whoa.
Here's my thing. I believe in the Second Amendment that you have a right to protect yourself. I also think it should be damn hard to get a gun.
Right. It should be.
It's really
psychological evaluations. It should cost you a ton of money. Go on.
That's exactly my view. My view should be damn hard. It shouldn't be as easy to get a gun as it is to buy a loaf of bread. And in parts of this country it is. And I think that's a problem. I understand the feeling of protection. I grew up where my parents live right now. If you call the police, they're not coming for a half hour, right? And I understand that you might want to have a rifle in your house because things might happen. You never know. But it ought to be hard to get that rifle. Or maybe not a rifle because you're using that for hunting mostly, but a handgun for sure. A handgun's made for one reason, and it's to kill people.
Right.
It's not made for hunting.
A lot of my friends are out buying guns, and they've been showing them to me and taking a lot of pride in their guns. And it's a little sci-fi to me.
Yeah, and I was reading just yesterday about a group in Seattle.
Love you guys.
Who are advocating to more liberal people to buy guns. Yeah. And I feel like I understand that. I understand that it's a give and take. The conservatives are all about guns. Liberals should have them too. I think, somewhere more along the lines of it's about safety in society, and in a civil society, we don't need an armed populace.
In a civil society, we don't need an armed populace. Are we a civil society?
Yeah, that might be questionable. Well, no, we are. Yeah.
You promise?
I promise. And I think that you can solve your differences pretty much with anybody, either by walking away or by having a simple conversation.
But that's not happening now.
It's not. People are really worked up. And I
mean, you heard about this dude who was murdered yesterday at the protest. Where was it?
I don't think I heard.
I was in Oregon, I believe.
It was in Portland.
Yeah, I think so. No, I'm wrong. I was watched Chris Como today. It's somewhere in Dallas. It was in Dallas. Go on. But BLM protest, and a white guy married to a black woman had an AK-47 on his shoulder protesting and was shot by a guy in a car.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And
I mean, it's mayhem.
It's mayhem. Yeah. And the more, the statistic that the NRA likes to throw out is 340 million guns out there in America right now. That's a gun for every American. Every American, and obviously I don't have one in my house, so some people have lots. When I grew up, the gun rack in our house was literally above my bed, but it was hunting guns.
Right. It wasn't about murdering people or killing. It was about animals.
Yeah, it wasn't even really about self-protection. Like it was about hunting, and so.
Why do you think people have these obsessions with collecting guns and going out in Walmarts and stores and having these guns over their shoulders? It's weird.
I think it's a little bit of freedom. Like they want to say, look, I could do it, so I'm gonna. Right.
But you've been out of the country. I always talk about this. That's freedom. Go see what freedom really doesn't look like.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. But I think that in this country, if you let people do things, they will do it. And so if we're letting people,
we shouldn't let people walk around city streets with guns on them, exposed or not. Unless you're a cop.
I totally think that if you have a gun and
you're looking for trouble. You're looking for trouble. You're asking for trouble. You're ready for trouble.
Yep.
Okay, your energy is trouble. Your intentions speak of trouble.
Yeah, you're
not everybody, because I know the argument for people would say, no way, it's my right to protect myself. There's crazy people out there, you never know. Right. I get that. But regardless, if you have a gun underneath your seat and somebody crazy comes around you, you're going to be more prone to want to get involved and play Superman than mind your own business, right?
Right, exactly.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I shouldn't apologize. I don't apologize. This is my opinion.
Yeah, my opinion is that it should be hard to get. You should be able to have it for protection if you want, and you can prove that you need it for that. I'm all for that. But I don't think that the general populace should be able to go out and buy an AR-15 rifle for any reason. So you just don't need it.
Was it you that was telling me that AR does not stand for assault rifle?
It doesn't. I forget what it stands for, though.
Okay. All right. I learned something new. I thought it might have been from you or somebody else.
Yeah. It doesn't stand for assault rifle.
And this is a big part of, and I want you to get vulnerable with me. I really want you to get, because you got so much insight about really right and wrong, and I don't want to go liberal, conservative. I don't want to take that route with you. But I want to understand, where maybe some of the disconnect is with a lot of people in today's society, why this racial divide has gotten bigger. It has, right?
It has.
Why?
Right.
Is it Trump?
Yeah. So I grew up in the Midwest, and a fraction of my family has deep ties to Appalachia. So there's that. They made their way to Northwest Indiana because of the steel mills, and so, but there's a tie to that deep rooted Southern white society that I grew up around, and so I've seen it and have a little bit of it in my background, and so what I think is happening is, as the country moves, so two things are happening. So as the country moves more and more towards a multiracial society, so where whites aren't making up 80% of the country anymore, right? And in here in California, it's in most of the counties, it's majority minority. So there's a feeling of losing something, and so I think there's a fight to not lose a way of life or not lose power.
Which is why the Confederate flag is so important and such a, it stands for so much for these people nowadays. Statues, not these people, but a lot of folks who you're referring to that identify with this as part of their culture.
Yeah. And so they're afraid that, their school board's going to look a lot different, and their city councils or, the town mayor or whatever.
And it's happening.
A lot different. It is happening, and it's real. And it's a real fear. That some politicians nationally, Donald Trump, they're tapping into that, right?
Yeah.
That's what everything that he is doing right now is to tap into that fear. And then the other piece of it is in the Midwest, where famously Donald Trump won because he won the Midwest. In the Midwest, there's another dynamic, which I already sort of alluded to, which is it used to be that when you graduated high school, there would be a job at the local factory. And you would do that, and you would do that for 20 or 30 years, and it would be a good living, and you'd be done, right?
I think I know you're going with this.
Yeah, and now that doesn't exist.
So with what you just mentioned, because this kind of got me thinking, is it so a lot of that similar mentality just rolls over? It's like when people don't get out of their comfort zone, they don't learn, right?
Right.
So a lot of the people that you grew up with had the same ideologies as their parents and grandparents and so forth.
Yep. And so there wasn't necessarily, and I know a lot of people argue with me on this, but there wasn't necessarily a push towards added education beyond high school because there were jobs, and you would go, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, you would graduate and then you would go get a job and you would join a union, at least where I was from, join a union, and you would do that for the next 30 years.
You wouldn't move to LA to be a singer. You wouldn't go to New York to be a journalist. You wouldn't go to Chicago to be a lawyer.
Right. And you would stay in your local community, and that's the way it was.
And marry somebody from high school. And,
Yep.
Yeah, small town.
Yeah. And that's exactly how it was. But that
Is or
way
was?
Was.
Okay.
That way of life is going away. There's a book called it's called The Hillbilly Elegy.
Wow. Okay. What's it about? Go on.
And it's literally about escaping a small town in Ohio.
You suggest listeners to read this?
Yes. It's I think it's the author's name is Vance.
Okay. Last name Vance.
Vance.
We're going to add that to part of your solutions at the end of this conversation.
Yeah.
We like to give people some things to take home, and that sounds like a good one.
It's a really good one.
Could I benefit? Well, I guess we all could benefit from that. Yeah.
And you get a little bit of insight as to like where the background of that is, and he does, his path went a little farther than mine, but he ends up joining the military, and then he goes to law school, ends up at Yale Law School, and he talks a lot about how easy it was to enter Yale Law School, even though he didn't have any money. And there's a whole chapter in the book about how he was able to do that. But the bigger
Why
thing,
was he able to? Because he
the military service and
he cashed in.
and a lot of the, according to him, I went to Georgia State University, but according to him, a lot of the Ivy League schools have outreach programs to poorer families.
Got it.
And because his family was really poor, he was able to go almost for free. And so I thought that was interesting. So he went to Ohio State Ohio State University for his pre-law and then law at Yale. And it's an interesting story because it's very similar to what I had. His family had ties to Appalachia, Kentucky. He talks about the history of the people coming up from Appalachia into the Rust Belt states to get jobs, right? And that was in the 30s, 40s, 50s. And then, they had those jobs for decades. And it was a lifestyle. Your parents worked at a factory. You went to work at that factory.
So you kind of broke the mold within your family.
Yep.
With you're the kind of black sheep.
Yeah, I left.
Still are the black sheep.
Yeah, and I, even just the idea of going to college right out of high school was pretty dramatic in parts of my family. So I was gonna do that, and I ended up not because I didn't want to go to a Christian school, and I didn't want to cause a rift in the family by just saying, look, I'm going to go to a public college.
What are your thoughts on Christianity now?
I still consider myself a Christian. I still believe in God and Jesus died for your sins, all that stuff. I don't go to church. I have periodically gone on and off to church. I am looking for, if I were to go to a church, I would want a church that has a positive message. Challenge me, what can I do? Don't tell me what I shouldn't do.
What you can't do.
Right.
Yeah, good point.
And if I could find that church, I'd probably go. Right now, and they do exist. Right now, though, it just doesn't fit in my life.
Yeah.
And so I just don't go.
We had a guest on Center for Spiritual Living. I learned a lot about their ideologies, and I come from kind of the same idea, which is like, it needs to be positive. There needs to be direction, right?
Yeah.
And not slamming and talking about the past.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I know that they have a gay pastor. I know that place might be something that might jive with what you're talking about. All right, so jump in because now I want you to talk a bit about. We'd already talked about gay vets, which is something you want to talk about. We already talked about you heading down to San Diego for the submarine USS Alexandria. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
Yeah, we could talk a little bit about. Well, we've talked a little bit about it, but race relations.
Yeah.
right?
I'd like to.
My take on that.
So, do you want me to kind of form a question, or do you have some insight?
You could ask me a question.
All right. Well, I mean, it's weird because I'm 42. I'm a mixed race guy. Everybody knows that. The bio is on, doyourpartpodcast.com. Obviously, my experience is going to be very, very different from yours. And a lot of people I know that are white seem to be in two parts. One is either they understand the plight of a black man and what we're going through, or a lot of them think that we're paranoid and that it's manifested and that, we have control over this. What do you think about that?
Right. So, I'll say that I had a time in my life where, I grew up in a relatively poor family, pretty poor, actually. We were lower middle class. Mm-hmm. But there were definitely times where we struggled. And so when I started hearing people talk about white privilege, I would often scoff at that and say, what are you talking about? And it took me quite some time to come around to the fact that I was a benefit of white privilege.
So then define that. What is white privilege?
So for me, it can be as simple as not fearing getting pulled over if you roll through a stop sign. It can be that simple. It can be as simple as if I go into a store in Palm Desert, which we're in right now, no one's going to follow me.
Why? Oh,
yeah.
Why is this so easy for you? Yeah. And why did it take you a while to get to this conclusion?
I think I was thinking bigger.
Maybe the words were just too bigger. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I was thinking that white privilege was this idea that all white people are born with a silver spoon in their mouth and going to college is easy and all this, right?
That's not what it means.
And that's not what it means.
Right.
And so you have these, some white people who have a similar background to me who are like, hey, you shouldn't be giving, and I'm just going to pick on Michigan State University because they seem to be in the news often about affirmative action. You shouldn't be giving, black people a free ride at Michigan State University if I can't get in. Mm-hmm. Now I grew up poor. I had a broken family, blah, 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 all that stuff, right? And so I think that they think, and definitely I did. I thought, well, I don't have white privilege. I wasn't born like that. Mm-hmm. I have a lot more in common with black people than I do with most white people. Mm-hmm. And so I obviously don't have white privilege. I thought that. That's not true. And it's funny because I've kind of become the voice of that. If I'm out with a white friend and they say something like, oh, why did that person come to a full stop? I'll be like, oh, there's your white privilege.
So you speak out and you actually you to your friends.
Yeah, I'll say it. Like I was riding with somebody the other day.
How do they respond to that? Eye roll, or do they think about it?
A little bit of an eye roll, but sometimes you'll get a positive response.
And this is what needs to be happening in society always, but especially now, is dialogue, conversation, and pulling and accountability. Right. I was talking to a friend the other day, and she said something about Jewing somebody down, and she stopped herself in that moment, checked herself, and then has been talking about it ever since. It's about small things. It's about accountability. I didn't know this about you, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm relieved to hear this, but it still concerns me. I often use my cousin who doesn't like those words, white privilege. It concerns me that people just don't understand how easy it is to understand.
It's really easy. Everybody knows. Like I was talking to my brother the other day, who is not somebody who would think, who believes in white privilege. But I said, we were talking specifically about police, brutality, and he said something about we should respect the police, and I said, here's the deal, like when the police stop specifically targeting one group, and then brutalizing that one group, then then all the rest will become unnecessary. Mm-hmm. But the fact is, as well as I know, that if you get pulled over just for being black in some communities, and if that is still going to keep happening, then we have to have a movement to prevent that. Like, it's that simple.
And that's what this movement is.
Yeah, that's what this movement is.
So how do we get people to kind of jump on board with your ideology, with the fact that white privilege is there and that it is something that should be acknowledged. You know, I think I saw a GIF on Facebook. It's like, I will not apologize for being white. I don't think people are asking anybody to make any apologies. It's just about acknowledging things within yourself.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You know, it's the idea that, everybody struggles. Mm-hmm. But
I've had privilege.
yeah, right. Everybody struggles,
And
and
I've had
everybody
struggles,
has some privilege. But there is definitely in our society a difference in how you're treated if you're white versus other races.
Period.
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 And I
Period.
you know, I don't think that's an argument that
You know what? I just had a little bit of an epiphany. If you are white and you don't know what that experience is like, then how do you gauge it? How do you understand it? So I will say, on the flip side, I just had a little bit of an epiphany for me, because it seems like 2 + 2 is 4. Like, you guys, it's not that hard. But again, if you're living in this kind of your own bubble, as we all are, and you're not influenced or affected by that, what do you have to compare it to?
So I have an example of how I saw white privilege up close and personal in my life. So I bought a car in Illinois, and it had tinting on the passenger and driver's windows. Well, that's illegal in Illinois. And I bought the car in Illinois. It had been driven in Illinois. It was several years old. It was a used car. So I was like, I'll get around to doing that at some point. And I drove the car. My boyfriend at the time was black. And so he was driving us back from Target, both of us in the car. I had been driving this car for months. We got pulled over.
He's been in it 5 minutes.
Yep.
And boom.
Literally. And I swear that the Target that we lived close by was 3 blocks. So we didn't even drive 3 blocks. And boom, we got pulled over and got a ticket for the tinted windows. And, you know, both of us at the time, we laughed it off a bit. But the fact of the matter is I had been driving the car for months.
And weren't even looked at.
And not even looked at. And he drives the car for minutes.
So were you? So you laughed, but were you filled with confusion, rage? Were you angry? Did you feel like you wanted to speak on behalf of him when you got pulled over? Like, what was that emotional experience like?
So it was a little dizzying, right? Because you're like, wait. It took me a minute. Like, I think we were well into the encounter before I realized the reason we were pulled over. And then I was like, we got pulled over just because you're driving. And he's like, yeah. He's like, welcome to my life. And so I was shocked, and we took the tint off the window that day, and then I think we ended up not actually having to pay the fine because we proved that we corrected it.
Yeah, you fixed it.
Yeah, but at the same time, it was a little eye opening that you're just like, oh yeah.
And I guess also what I'm hearing is people need to open up their circles a little bit, diversify, so you can witness these things and really see it firsthand. Because if you've never seen it, you don't really believe it.
Yeah, if you've never ridden in a car with a black person driving, maybe you haven't seen how different they have to drive than you have to drive.
Yeah. It's true. I drive like a bat out of hell, but that's another conversation. I grew up in a small suburb in a very, very white community, and a lot of my friends still to this day are white. And my best friend, for example, she's witnessed so many things as far as just how I've been treated. Not necessarily treated badly, but just differently. And so... Again, I do think people need to be able to see what's happening first thing to really understand it.
Yeah, and you have to speak up sometimes. So when we were on the submarine, I remember one time we were taking off work day for President's Day. But then Martin Luther King Day was coming up, and the boat announced that we wouldn't be taking off for that, even though it's a federal holiday. And I remember saying to my friend, Eric, who is black, I was like, you should say something about that. We should all say something about that. I don't think it's fair that we take President's Day off, which at that time was an all-white man's club, right, and not take Martin Luther King Day off. And so enough of us said something that they ended up saying, yep, you're right.
And you made a change.
Yep, we made a change.
Get out of town.
Really simple.
And this started with you.
Yeah, well, it started with me and others. So as soon as they announced it, a lot of people were like, wait a second. Like, it wasn't just me.
Yeah, but you started the conversation.
Yeah, I started the conversation with my friend. Yeah.
I love that. This is a perfect example of how one conversation can plant a seed which can grow quickly and make change.
Yep.
Beautiful.
Very simple. And you
Wow.
know, an acknowledgement that, oh yeah, that might have been misguided.
Yeah.
So,
You know, truth be told, things fall to the wayside, and people, you know, we're lazy, I think, at times. And when you step into something and the template, the structure's already there, why make change?
Yep.
And these are the changes that need to be made.
Right.
Black Lives Matter, BLM. What is that? What do you think when you hear that?
So I have positive thoughts. So I think, for me, it's very simple. Like, you have to, if you look at what's going on with police brutality, yeah, it happens to all races.
Yeah.
Which was, I watched William Barr say that today, in front of
During the hearing,
a hearing, yeah. And yes, he's absolutely right. It happens to all races, but it is definitely true that the police have a reputation. I'm not going to group them all together, but there is definitely a vein in the police force that have targeted black people.
What is it? Blacks are 380 times more likely to be shot by a cop.
Yeah, and so so Barr today, I'll just share one statistic. He said that there have been 8 unarmed.
I could have been wrong on that quote. Go ahead.
Yeah, he said there's been 8 unarmed blacks shot by police so far this year, and there's been 11 white unarmed people shot by the police. And so obviously the connotation there, what he's trying to get across, is that more whites have been shot. Well, whites make up 70% of the country, and
It's just math.
Yeah, and blacks make up 10%. So the fact that it's almost the same number, 8 and 11 is not that far apart,
Speaks volumes.
is ridiculous. Yeah.
It's all math. So he actually put his foot in his mouth by saying that.
And so, like, when I watched, that was literally the only part that I could stomach to watch of his hearing, and I turned it off literally right after that. I'm like, yeah, I'm done. Like, I get where you're going. You're trying to say that police brutality is an overall problem, but he's
We're not
missing
buying
the
it.
point
Yeah.
of Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, it's deflection.
Yeah,
Which
it's
is
deflection.
what everyone's been doing since Trump's been in office.
And the group Black Lives Matter has been vocal about no police brutality is okay.
Right. Period. Well, duh.
Yeah, they're like,
Because there's right and there's wrong.
Yeah.
The reason I ask you that is because I know that BLM has been inflammatory for a lot of people, regardless of what side they're on. And they're like, oh, it's an organization. And you go on their website and see where the money goes and what they're funding. I think there's that. And then there's the BLM message.
Right.
And for me, the focus is on the message.
Yeah, me too.
Just that Black Lives Matter and that and that there's a problem and it needs to be focused on.
Yeah,
Period.
that's exactly how I am. I don't.
It's easy.
I honestly don't follow the group, but I also don't think the group's doing awful things, but I don't really follow them. And, it's not something I do. I think it's a great message that they have.
I agree with you. And I don't follow them either, but I like to follow the message and I like to continue to talk about it. Do you have hope for the future?
I do. So here's the thing. If you go back in time 12 years ago, Barack Obama got elected, first black president, right? I was a huge supporter. I really loved the fact that he got elected. That was a bit of a revolution. Unfortunately, I don't think that we quite lived up to that revolution. And then now we're having the counter revolution, or at least the last couple of years have been the counter revolution to that revolution.
So this was, I like what you're saying. This was predictable.
Yeah, it's predictable. This was, people got upset and they don't like the, more freedoms for homosexuals, more freedoms for black people, more,
And this has kind of been the ebb and flow of our political system.
right, and
Period.
DACA and the whole thing, right? So there a lot of things that I personally consider positive aren't viewed by a lot of people as positive, and they fought back, and so we ended up with a really the most conservative Senate in my lifetime, and the most right-wing president in my lifetime, and I think that was a little bit predictable, because those of us who were part of the change of 2008, we got used to it. We're like, yay, it's all done, and it's not done.
I sure relaxed.
I
I
relaxed.
was like, this was like hit us like a train. I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
But you're right. If you take hindsight,
Hindsight.
2020. If you really think about it,
Yeah, I wish I'd read that book I talked about, The Hillbilly Elegy, before Trump got elected. which it was out that summer, and I didn't read it, but he predicted that that working class whites in the Midwest would go for Trump in a way that was not normal for that community, and he predicted that, and I think he's right. Like he predicted it because he said exactly that they're afraid, and the amount of change is overwhelming, and they don't see a positive future for their community, and so yeah,
and that's what we've been seeing and continuing to.
Yep, that's what. Yeah, and until those communities are included, and I think there can be outreach to those poorer white communities throughout the country, and there could be outreach to that, and should be. And yeah, coal miners aren't getting their jobs back, steel mills aren't being built, auto industry is spread out throughout the world. All of those things that used to employ a group of working class people are going away,
right.
and or have gone away, and we need a message that and a strategy that helps those groups of people. And it's not even just working class white people; it's working class people in general.
It's everybody.
Yeah. So there needs to be an alternative when you get out of high school. What are you going to do? Right? And again, not everyone's going to join the military. Not everyone's going to go to college. So what are you going to do?
Right.
And I'm sorry, but working at Walmart or even working at Starbucks is not the answer in the long run.
Yeah, we were talking about this a few days ago. A buddy of mine, but home ec, drafting, workshop, or wood shop rather, auto shop. These are all trades that you would learn in school that would motivate you to want to go get into some sort of trade outside of school. I've got friends who are roofers and electricians and plumbers, and they lead beautiful lives. They do very well for themselves. And you're right. There was this kind of this missing link that happened as we've kind of fast forwarded into 2020. Defund the police. What's up with that?
So I dislike
the terminology, right?
Yeah. I understand the sentiment though, and I understand the policy behind it.
So put it in layman's for people.
Yeah. So I think it's more about distribution of funds to change the police. So, and I don't know, that's not a catchphrase that I can wrap up. I wish I had a 2-word catchphrase I could wrap up that everybody could get behind. But I see it in my life. So, I manage a coffee shop, and there's times where you have to call 911, like you just have a problem, right? Yeah. And the police will show up, but that problem might really just be a social justice problem, or a like a homeless person who fell asleep in the bathroom. Who do you call? The only people to call right now are the police.
What a great example. And that's wasting the police force. That's wasting their time.
It's absolutely wasting their time, and it's making them do things that we're paying a lot for a police force to do that, and that's really a job that could be done by anybody.
So we're not saying that we're taking salary away from police or affecting what they take home or anything. We're talking about reallocating some of the funds for people who can handle certain situations that don't need police.
Absolutely. And
same with maybe domestic violence isn't the best example, but people with mental issues, homeless people.
Yeah. Like if you look at what the George Floyd case, let's just say that in particular, the shop owner called the police because of a counterfeit check. Is that really a reason that the police, who were supposed to actively stop, protect the community, is that a reason they need to show up? I would argue no. Like maybe if you called a number and said, hey, I think I have a counterfeit check, I'm going to hold on to it. Can somebody look into it? I don't know that you need a police response immediately for a counterfeit check. And I think it's a waste of their time to do. And look what happened. Like it escalated way out of control.
Yeah.
And so, that could have been avoided if there had just been in Minneapolis a way for somebody else in the community to deal with a counterfeit check or what was suspected. I'm not even
or a
sure.
homeless man sleeping.
Or a homeless man sleeping inside a bathroom.
I had a sheriff on a few weeks ago, and he talked about what it's like. He actually used an example of CHP opposed to police, and how CHP, their mentality is a little different because they're not used to the same that beat on the street and dealing with just gritty people and having to be a little more callous with their days, right?
Right.
So I use that as an example because it's true. I mean, as a cop, I mean, when you're right, all you're doing is just slapping cuffs on people, and that's what you're doing. It seems like you would kind of have that same attitude with almost everything that you're touching, and some things wouldn't merit that attitude or energy or cuffs or etc.
Yep, absolutely. I've seen it so much because I worked in two cities, and I went to college at Georgia State University, which is right in downtown Atlanta, and so you're surrounded. There's a huge homeless population in Woodruff Park in downtown Atlanta. I don't know if you've been there, but it's right off Peachtree, and and so I've seen the cops have to deal with stuff that really maybe a social worker should be dealing with.
Yeah, you've witnessed it.
Yeah, and I've seen it in my shop a bunch of times, countless times, where we've had to call the police just because there's no one else to call. Like we had somebody who was obviously, maybe on some substance or something, who fell asleep and then urinated all over herself. Well, what do you do? Right? You're like, okay, I need you to get out, right? But they're out of it, and so you call the police, and again, in that situation, I just wonder if there's not a better solution than the police showing up with guns. And, you're just going to escalate a situation that doesn't need to be escalated.
It just fuels it.
Yeah.
I witnessed it. I've watched something small turn into something huge because too many people are getting involved, and that's how energy works. That's how, I don't want to say masculinity, but, everyone wants to get involved and fueling and feeding the fire. I'm glad. I wanted to ask you that because, again, I think that you have a great way of, again, putting things into layman's, and it's all about the voice it's coming from, right? These are all from BLM to defund the police. These are all very inflammatory words for people, and I don't like that those are the terms and titles. I think that we could have done better.
Yeah.
From white privilege to defund the police, etc. Because that's not really that's not really the direction with the message. But anyway, I'm really glad that I was able to ask you those questions. We're going to start to wrap things up. Wrap things up. You mentioned Hillbilly Elegy by Mr. Vance. That's the author. So I want you to take this time to add anything else you'd like to add today, and I want you to leave us with some solutions because that's really a big part of what we do here.
Yeah, I would say the biggest solution is to vote.
Ooh.
I can't stress that enough. Vote any way you can, by mail. Show up if you need to, depending on what state you're in. Because I know some states don't do mail-in voting. I love that California does do mail-in voting. I use that here. Love it. I wouldn't even have thought about it in Illinois, but it's available there. So vote is the best thing you can do. That's how you raise your voice. I'm not saying vote for my guy. Which I didn't even mention, by the way. Not saying that, but get out and vote. That's your voice. That's how things change. That's the best way to change things. If you don't like, corporate sponsors inside our government, if you don't like, or if you do like that, vote. That's the number one thing we can all do. And then I would say the second thing that we can do is put your money where your mouth is, so to speak. If you are worried about, how the military is treated, like for me, I saw a need for the submarine that I happened to serve on. I saw a need and jumped out there and asked friends to help, and it worked.
Get involved.
Do something.
Do your part.
Yeah, get out. Right now it's the middle of a pandemic, and it occurred to me that the national parks are full of people, and it actually didn't occur to me. We went to Joshua Tree, and it was full of people, and I was like, wow, who's taking care of all this? Well, it turns out I saw an article about it's mostly volunteers,
right,
that are getting out there, and I just read it yesterday, but what a great way to get outside in the middle of a pandemic. Yeah, get out there and help the park that's closest to you. There's something we can all do. There's always something we can do to make our community a little bit better. And then my last thing is simple: be kind to people.
That should have been number one. Go
Yeah,
on.
yeah. That's the simplest thing we can all do is be kind. If I see somebody, I'm not a Trump fan. I see somebody come in with the Trump mask on, I'm going to say thank you for wearing your mask. Simple. I don't need to try to change who they are or say something disparaging.
Or focus on the difference. You're focusing on the commonality.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for wearing a mask. Appreciate it. Yeah. That's simple. I think we're all, and this is me included. We got a little too us and them. And your us and them depends on who you are, but we got a little too us and them, and maybe it's time to just, be kind to each other and just
be we, not us and them.
Yeah.
I like that because you're right. It's this whole, there's so many things that we can now choose to divide ourselves over, and that seems to be the focus instead of, again, what do we have that's similar?
Yeah. If I had to pick why the pandemic was worse here in the United States, I think it's actually a little bit more of we politicize everything and make it about us and them than the failed response by the administration.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot more of it was bound to happen. If we'd had Hillary Clinton as president, there would have been a group on either side that would have politicized this pandemic. It's just who we are right now, and we need to get past that.
Yeah. I often think that this is the call. This is what we need. This is where the consciousness will begin to shift, and good things will happen. All right, I'm going to let you go. I've had you here for over an hour, and I'm really grateful. This is kind of what I was wanting from you.
Nice.
So thank you. You feel good about this?
Yeah. Thank you for having me. It was great.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, you heard it. So Dave is his name. At the end of this, you can hop onto our website, and we'll have some detail about how you can contact him. I don't know how comfortable he is with people knocking at his door, meaning Facebook, etc. But we'll throw up some information from him for you. Remember, his solutions is to be kind, make sure you vote, and put your money where your mouth is. I like that. Speaking of mouths, I've been a bit of a marble mouth today. Excuse me, but again, we love you, and do your part. Take care of each other, and a big thanks to Dave. We'll see you soon.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, guys, have a good one.
Stay connected with Brian Gallo through social media at Do Your Part Podcast or visit doyourpartpodcast.com.